Hey, Bruce here, your boomer consumer. Okay, boomer, you like the shirt? Listen, this video is not intended to persuade anybody not to buy vintage audio gear, not to collect it. But I've been doing this for a few years now, and I wanted to share with you some thoughts about vintage audio and kind of what's going on, and maybe hopefully give you some pointers of some food for thought before you plunk down your hard-earned dollars on collecting vintage audio. And so I made some notes here. You see me looking down. I got some notes in front of me. The first point, once you decide that you want to collect vintage audio gear and you narrow down the pieces you're looking for, and believe me, there's a lot, because HIFI was the absolute entertainment of a lot of homes back in the 70s and probably even the early 80s, 60s, 70s. A lot of homes had a HIFI system of one type. And there's a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different gear that was manufactured. All right, let's get that out of the way. But once you pick out what you want, now it comes to the point of acquiring it, right? How do I get it? How do I find it, locate it, etc.? And I think a lot of people, your natural inclination is to look at Facebook Marketplace. Maybe you're looking on eBay, Reverb, those kind of places. Maybe you have some thrift stores in the area. Maybe you go to rummage sales. Maybe you go to auctions, whatever. Okay, so more of what I'm talking about is when you don't, especially if you don't have the ability to actually see something beforehand, you're kind of buying online, you're going off of advertising, marketing, whatever, right? There's some pitfalls there, big ones. Besides the obvious scammers out there, and let's just start talking about pricing. It has absolutely getting insanely crazy expensive on some types of vintage gear. Some of the most desirable pieces out there tend to come from Rant, Pioneer, Sansui, JVC, some Carver stuff, some Harman Kardon, now even some Kenwood and Realistic. These prices are getting out of control. And what you're seeing is people trying to command top dollar for 40, 50-year-old audio gear that's not even been serviced. And if you read their ads, which I get kind of a kick out of, because you got to read between the lines. Powered up, and maybe in the ad will say tested. Well, did you test everything? Well, if you read we didn't have the ability to test the phono stage on this receiver. We weren't able to test the tape loop. We weren't able to test. So you really don't know if it's truly working or not, right? So that is something to keep in mind, that these people are trying to get top dollar. In fact, wanting more than what you could buy a comparable spec-wise. Now, maybe with something that's even got more features, decent quality for equal or less money with a warranty. Instead, buy this 40, 50-year-old piece of gear that's never been touched, never been serviced. You don't know. Now, when you see an ad that says service, let's talk about service. My tech serviced it. Okay, what'd your tech do? Crickets. Or, what does the word serviced even mean? To some, it just means maybe wiping it down with a little bit of Windex, maybe shooting a little deoxit in the controls, maybe wiping out some dust bunnies, putting it back together. That's serviced. No. Not in my opinion, that's not service, okay? Service would mean to me that it at least performs, a technician has went through, they've identified any trouble with the unit, replaced whatever bad parts are in it, capacitors, known transistors, etc. They've, made sure if it's a receiver that the tuning is set correctly, there's no DC offset, that this thing is good to go in the condition it is today. That does not mean that 3 months after you buy it, it shoots scraps on you. All right, because another component might have been working fine when the tech had it on their bench, but now it's failing. because of maintenance is going to be much more on a vintage piece of gear than a brand new piece of gear, right? Because of all the components. Some of these monster receivers have many different boards in them, the PCBs on there that are 40, 50 years old. Solder joints can go bad from heating and cooling. Relays can fail. Fuses can blow. Bad transistors. It was working fine when I bought it off of eBay. 3 months later, nothing. Unit won't power up. So just because it was serviced doesn't mean that it's plug and play and it'll be good for another 40 more years. No, what you're really wanting is something that's been fully refurbished. And even then, things can still go wrong. Okay? Again, those boards are 40, 50 years old, and they're not being replaced even during a refurbish. They may change the capacitors. They may change out the transistors. They may do a lot of stuff to it, but a lot of the wiring and a lot of the parts are still 40 or 50 years old. Will it last 20 more years without a problem? Maybe. But then again, it might fail 3 months later. So just keep in mind that unit is essentially a 40, 50-year-old unit, maybe with some new parts, maybe with new capacitors and so forth, but something else could fail that passed. But refurbished, at least, is you're changing out all the electrolytics, you're changing out bad transistors, etc. Now, one trick that I use, especially with eBay, is I'll look at the completed item sale, and generally I look at the condition and what the seller is offering, what they're advertising, and then I try to find stuff that actually sold kind of generally around the same, and that kind of helps me decide on the buying decision. Now, I prefer, if at all possible, to actually buy from somebody as local as I can. Unfortunately, living in a small town, not that many vintage audio pieces that show up, and when they do, a lot of them is pretty much gone. They're in pretty poor condition, and yet some of these people will still get on eBay and see, oh, this little Pioneer SX737 sold for, $450. Well, this one I found in Grandpa's basement, it's covered, it kind of looks like there's corrosion and there's cobwebs in it. $450. No, it's crazy. And let's not even get started on the various scammers out there trying to steal your money by offering online deals. For example, Facebook Marketplace is full of this stuff. People using pictures from somebody else's ad, no. Again, if it sounds too good to be true, it generally is. Anyhow, we're talking about the value. Okay, now let's get back to, these sellers, and then there's shipping. Now, I bought a Marantz 2230. Beautiful little receiver, sweet sounding. I did buy it off of eBay. I couldn't find one anywhere locally, and I really wasn't up to driving out of state to go look at one. But an ad came up on eBay, and seller had very good ratings. But this was recapped supposedly 5 years ago. And I won't go over the price I paid for it, which I thought at the time was fair, given what completed sales have been for this particular unit. And when it arrived, I was delighted to see it came out of the box. Everything looked great until I looked on the back and I seen where the antenna terminals were pushed into the case because it wasn't packed properly. See, this is another thing. You're depending on sellers, when you buy online and have it shipped to you, that they know what they're doing with the shipping. And it kind of got into a big, ugly thing, but ultimately the seller did a partial refund. Now, this will be something I'll be able to do on my own. And let's talk about text and that kind of thing for just a second. There's a great YouTube channel called Skylabs, and they deal in repairing vintage audio gear, and I think they sell some out of the store. Apparently, they don't want people shipping gear to them. They got enough business. It's him and his dad, and the techs that he has in his employ are older guys who have retired from one job and maybe they're just making some side money. But they're hanging it up. Skilled technicians, that people that really know this gear, They're getting as rare as hen's teeth out there. And thus, if you buy this stuff and you don't know how to work on electronics, and believe me, it's a lot more than just a soldering iron and some solder, okay? See, the real trick is diagnosing a problem. Replacing capacitors and transistors, that's the easy part. Figuring out what to replace, that's the hard part. And the guys that have that skill and experience are leaving the business in droves, and there does seem to be a whole new crop coming up. So that means that there's competition for getting the repairs done. So in order to get maybe that vintage receiver fixed, you may find yourself having to ship it off. And that means making sure that it's insured and it's packaged all correctly. And then take your time in queue. 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 14 months. You might be waiting to get that receiver back. Now, let's not even get started on things like cassette decks, which I happen to be a big fan. I just enjoy for the nostalgia reason. Cassette decks are mechanical and electronic. And there's more unobtainium parts in cassette decks than there are in vintage receivers, for sure. Why? Because you have the motors, you have the heads, you have the cap stands, you've got all these various parts in there. Simply aren't made anymore. And even in vintage receivers and so forth, if it's a cosmetic item like a button or a knob or whatever that's missing, good luck in finding a replacement. Again, unobtainium. Go take a cassette deck transport apart, little E-clip pops off. You better find it, because you may not get a replacement. I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit, but you get the idea. Be very careful with vintage audio gear that has mechanical components to it, because the motors, that's another big issue. These companies, they're gone now. They're just absolutely gone. They don't make this stuff anymore, and you can't call up Pioneer and say, hey, I need a new head for my CTF 900. They probably wouldn't even know what you're talking about. May not even get somebody who speaks English answering the phone there. Anyhow, you get the point. Will the value hold on this stuff? At the end of the day, if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to buy this vintage receiver, hang on to it for 6 months, a year, and flip it, possibly you'll make money. Not saying you won't. But what if you think, I just know it's going to continue going up and up and up. I'm going to buy all this stuff and hang on to it for long term and sell for a fortune. Well, a lot of us buy vintage audio for the same reason guys buy vintage cars, classic cars, right? Well, what happens when we no longer are here to our collection? Because the younger people today who will be older then, and they'll have the time and the money to acquire this stuff, they won't have that nostalgia for this gear. They didn't grow up with it. They didn't lust after it when they were 16, 18, 20 years old. All right? That's not what they had. So there's no guarantee that $15,000 vintage Pioneer receiver is going to be worth anywhere near that 20, 30 years from now. There's no guarantee. The market could totally, absolutely collapse on this stuff. Just something to keep in mind. Let's go back to that vintage Pioneer unit for just an example. I know it's an extreme case, right? But it's nothing to see, untouched vintage gear going for hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars with nothing being done to it, right? Well, let's take that SX 1980 for half the price. And I'm just going to I happen to be a Yamaha fan. I like their stuff. I'm not into Dan Agostino and the Boulder power amps and the multi tens of thousands of dollars gear. That's just not I don't have that kind of money. Okay. But a lot of Yamaha stuff is somewhat affordable. But let's take what I think is or was their top of the line 2-channel integrated amplifier, which is the AS3200. Retail is around $8,000. If you shop around, you probably could get one for maybe $7,000, somewhere in that price tag. 100 watts a channel, beautifully made. Reminds you very much of the quality they put back in in the 70s on how well it's made in Japan, not made in anywhere else. So well made, top of the line quality on this thing. BU meters would fit right in with the vintage audio system, especially this nice silver aluminum case. Beautiful. Half the price of the 1980. Not as powerful watts-wise at only 100, and I forget what the 1980 is. It's a tremendous amount of power. But you're getting a full warranty. You're getting all new parts in there, and it should last you for many decades. You cannot say the same thing about that 1980. If one board were to, blow on that thing, how are you going to replace it? You can't go buy it here. You've got $15,000 in this thing, assuming you actually paid that. You're going to spend $5,000 for a broken one in order just to get that board? I don't think so. Well, maybe you would. I guess you got $15K to drop on a toy. You can probably afford another $5K to fix it. But you get my point. Hopefully you get my point. And so we collect vintage audio because I think many of us are nostalgic. We like the repairability of it, especially if you can do your own repairs. And we enjoy the aesthetics of this gear. Let's face it, in my opinion, we love meters. We love our meters. We love that silver face look. But that appeals to a certain segment of us. Not everybody cares about the looks. Not everybody's going to care about the repairability. Many people's going to want ease of use, convenience, cheap, low price. And when it breaks, they just will toss it and get another one. So this hobby only appeals to a small number of people. And to just kind of wrap it up, I'm even seeing these huge price increases on stuff that we considered to be bargain brands even back in the day. The Lafayette radio stuff, the Radio Shack stuff, Realistic, I think it was called at the time. There was a number, MCS or MCS was another brand, different store brands. Like Penny's had their own brand, Sears might have their own brands. Even that stuff, just people. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's valuable. One last thing. Rare. I forgot to mention this. Rarity. Something is rare because either A, it was a limited edition, only so many for sale, and that was that. B, it did not sell very well. People just didn't buy them. C, is because they didn't last, they didn't hold up, and they ended up in landfills. That's something else that a lot of these online sellers and so forth will put, that something is rare. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. It doesn't make it collectible. It just means one of those three things happen, right? Limited edition, okay, I can kind of see that. But if people didn't buy it and it didn't last, that doesn't make it valuable. It makes it rare, but not in a good rare. You want the collectible, highly sought after rare. But then to add possible insult to injury, if it's rare, then how are you going to get replacement parts? Well, that's all I really got to say. I'm sorry about the rant. I'd like to get your opinions in the comments down below. Bruce Naylor, you boomer consumer. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you later. Bye.